The galactic outbreak began with a sneeze. Not a metaphorical sneeze, an actual sneeze, one that erupted from the nostrils of the revered Ambassador Trilvorn of the Ezerac Consortium. The sound reverberated across the polished chamber of the Galactic Union Senate like a war horn muffled in velvet, prompting startled gasps and alarmed clicking from dozens of alien delegates. Ezeraki were known for their immaculately controlled bodily functions. A sneeze was practically a diplomatic incident. Ambassador Trilvorn hastily excused himself, his bulbous eyes leaking a thin, shimmering fluid. He stumbled out of the chamber on his spindly legs, leaving behind an eerie silence as delegates exchanged uneasy glances. No one thought much of it. Not yet. 3 days later, half the Ezeraki delegation was dead. By the end of the week, their homeworld Corvus had been quarantined under emergency protocols. The Galactic Union dispatched its best virologists, epidemiologists, and containment teams. What they found on Corvus chilled even the most battle-hardened enforcers of galactic order. The virus spread with a terrifying speed, infecting entire populations in hours. Its symptoms were brutal extreme respiratory failure, neurological degradation, and most bizarrely, an uncontrollable compulsion to vocalize in guttural patterns resembling primitive languages. The infection was dubbed Voknar syndrome, a name that carried a faint, sinister echo across the stars. Amid the chaos stood Dr. Ethan Voss, a human epidemiologist from Earth. He had been attending a small research symposium on the orbital station Zarthus 7 when the outbreak began. His colleagues from across the galaxy, the towering Galkrin with their iridescent exoskeletons, the gaseous Aurelis who communicated through vibrations, the luminescent aquatic Imri, had stared at him in open confusion when he offered to help. Humans were rarely involved in cutting-edge galactic medicine. Their physiology was too primitive, their immune systems alarmingly chaotic. Ethan's credentials, however, were impeccable. He had spent years studying zoonotic diseases, the crossover infections that spread between species. His research had focused on the unique microbiome of Earth and its constant, unpredictable evolution. The irony wasn't lost on him in a galaxy where Earth's lack of advanced technology made it a perennial joke. The messy, unpredictable biology of humans was often considered an inconvenience best ignored. That perception would change soon enough. The first real clue came from Aurelis Station 9. A cargo ship from Corvus had docked there, unknowingly bringing the virus along. The Aurelis, ethereal beings composed of semi-corporeal plasma, began to falter within hours. Their luminous forms dimmed, their vibrations turning erratic. The infection tore through their population like a plasma storm through a nebula. Ethan arrived with an interspecies medical team, determined to study the virus in a controlled environment. He quickly discovered something unnerving: the virus was adapting. It didn't just infect its hosts, it rewrote their genetic code. Within hours, the infected became vectors, shedding new, increasingly virulent strains. But the oddity lay in the humans on Aurelis Station 9. All 10 of them remained uninfected. "I don't understand it," muttered Dr. Voln, an Imri scientist. Her translucent body pulsed faintly as she hovered in the sterile lab. "Every species here has been affected except yours. Are humans immune?" Ethan shrugged, his brow furrowed as he studied a cluster of samples under the holo microscope. "Immunity doesn't make sense. It's too aggressive a virus. If anything, we should be overwhelmed by now." "Perhaps your species is simply incompatible," Vaughn suggested hesitantly. Her bioluminescence flickered with unease. "Humans are often described as biologically inefficient." Ethan chuckled, though there was no humor in it. "Inefficient is one word for it. But no, that's not it. I've seen this pattern before, something similar anyway, on Earth." The others in the lab stopped what they were doing. Even Voln's fluid motion stilled. "You're saying your planet has experienced this phenomenon?" asked Dr. Thrak, a Galkrin virologist. His towering form leaned closer, the light from the holo microscope reflecting off his chidnous body. "Not exactly," Ethan said, choosing his words carefully. "But Earth has a history of zoonotic viruses, diseases that jump from animals to humans. Our immune systems evolved to handle constant exposure to pathogens, especially because our ecosystems are so messy." That messiness might be why we're not affected yet. Dr. Thrak's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. A chaotic immunity could theoretically resist adaptation, but it is an anomaly in galactic biology. No other species relies on such randomness. Lucky us, Ethan muttered, but his stomach churned. He had a creeping suspicion that humanity's chaotic biology wasn't the whole story. There was something else going on, something the virus seemed to ignore when it encountered human cells. By the time the Galactic Union declared a state of emergency, nearly half of its member worlds had reported outbreaks. Entire planets were reduced to desolate quarantines, their populations succumbing to the virus or being consumed by societal collapse as fear and distrust spread faster than the disease itself. Ethan was summoned to the Central Research Facility on Cyrus Prime, a sprawling metropolis known for its cutting-edge technology and diverse population. He barely had time to process the grandeur of the city before being thrust into the chaos of the lab. Alien scientists worked frantically, their diverse forms moving with desperate precision as they analyzed samples, tested vaccines, and debated theories. Ethan's own work revolved around isolating the virus's core mechanisms. It didn't take long for him to identify the key difference between human and alien responses. The virus targeted specific cellular receptors found in almost every species except humans. Earth's chaotic evolutionary history had left those receptors absent or significantly mutated in human cells. "Does that mean we're safe?" asked Lieutenant Marik, a human security officer stationed on Cyrus Prime. His tone was hopeful, but his eyes betrayed the fear he shared with everyone else. Safe? Ethan shook his head. "Not even close. We're carriers. The virus doesn't kill us, but we can still spread it. And if it keeps mutating." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Ethan knew that the galaxy's only chance was to weaponize humanity's immunity. The idea wasn't new. Species had long used their biological quirks to combat diseases, but the scope of the challenge was staggering. He worked tirelessly, leading a team of scientists to develop a serum based on human immune responses. It was a delicate balance. They had to make the serum effective without causing unpredictable reactions in alien hosts. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. While studying the virus's genetic sequences, Ethan noticed a pattern that seemed intentional. The mutations weren't random. They followed a mathematical structure, one that hinted at design rather than nature. He froze, the realization crashing over him like a tidal wave. This isn't a natural virus. Dr. Thrake tilted his head, his mandibles clicking in confusion. "Explain." "It's engineered," Ethan said, his voice tight. "Someone created this." Dr. Thrak's mandibles clicked sharply, and his segmented eyes flared in alarm. The surrounding lab went silent, save for the steady hum of equipment. The notion of a deliberately engineered virus sent an electric charge through the room, a weight that was palpable, despite the species-specific differences in how it was felt. Who would create something like this? Vuln's bioluminescence dimmed to a troubled pulse as she spoke. Ethan didn't respond immediately. He was too engrossed in the holo display. The virus's genetic map sprawled before him. The structure was eerily beautiful, almost artistic in its elegance. Each mutation was purposeful, yet they all followed a rhythm that could be mistaken for natural evolution by anyone not looking closely. It was a kind of viral camouflage. He finally broke the silence. Someone who wanted to wipe out almost every species in the galaxy without firing a shot. "But why spare humans?" asked Thrak, his tone skeptical. "We are far from the galaxy's dominant species. Our civilizations have no meaningful rivalries with your kind." "That's what I'm trying to figure out," Ethan muttered. He leaned closer to the display, scanning the sequence for anything that might hint at intent. His mind churned, connecting disparate dots. The virus's receptor targeting wasn't just a coincidence. It was designed to be effective against specific biologies. Human immunity might not be an accident, but a deliberate exclusion. Before he could articulate his thoughts further, a sharp alarm blared through the facility. Thrak's exoskeleton rattled as he turned toward the nearest console, his appendages dancing over the controls. "There's been an outbreak in Sector 9, he announced grimly. Security containment breached. Dozens infected already. Ethan's gut tightened. That's impossible. The entire city's on lockdown. It appears someone let it in intentionally, Thrake said, his mandibles clicking in frustration. The words hit Ethan harder than they should have. Sabotage. Someone had engineered the virus, and now someone was ensuring it reached as many populations as possible. The galaxy wasn't dealing with a rogue pathogen, it was under attack. Cirrus Prime descended into chaos faster than anyone anticipated. The carefully maintained quarantines crumbled as fear and misinformation spread. Panic rippled through the city's streets, and alien civilians abandoned reason in favor of instinct. Some turned violent, blaming other species for the outbreak, while others sought to escape the planet altogether, potentially carrying the virus to new worlds. Ethan found himself thrust into a role he hadn't prepared for, organizing both medical efforts and security protocols. Lieutenant Marik, the human officer, had been assigned to assist him. Together, they coordinated evacuation efforts for uninfected zones while trying to keep infected individuals contained. In the midst of the chaos, Ethan couldn't shake the nagging feeling that humanity's immunity to the virus was more than just a quirk of evolution. If it wasn't a coincidence, then someone, somewhere, had to know why. As they worked, Ethan and Marik began receiving reports from other quarantined planets. The virus was behaving differently in various regions of the galaxy, mutating to exploit local conditions. Entire species vanished in days, while others clung to life, their populations decimated but not entirely wiped out. And still, humans remained untouched. Ethan's breakthrough came after the worst day yet. A containment breach in the research facility had forced them to abandon a critical lab, leaving behind irreplaceable samples. He was exhausted, his body aching from lack of sleep, and the relentless stress of keeping himself and others alive. Yet his mind refused to rest. He reviewed the genetic structure of the virus again, this time with a focus on its adaptation patterns. Something about the way it targeted specific receptor sites reminded him of a different field of study, bioengineering, from Earth, where pathogens had been tailored to attack invasive species and ecosystems without harming native populations. "Ethan, you look like hell," Marik said as he entered the cramped office-turned-lab. He set down a steaming cup of something resembling coffee, though its alien origin made its flavor suspect. "Take a break. Even humans have limits." Ethan ignored the jab, staring at his holo display. What if this virus was designed with a species-specific key, like a lock that only works on certain doors? Marik frowned. "You think this is a bioweapon?" "Not just any bioweapon," Ethan replied, his voice low. "A precision one. Whoever made it knew exactly what they were doing. But they also knew it wouldn't harm humans. The question is, why?" Marik's face darkened. "You think Earth is behind this?" The suggestion caught Ethan off guard. "What? No. We don't even have the tech for this level of engineering. Whoever's responsible is working with resources way beyond anything humans have." Marik grunted. "Then we're back to square one. Who hates the galaxy enough to commit mass genocide but loves humans enough to let us stick around?" Ethan didn't answer. He didn't need to. The evidence was still incomplete, but his instincts screamed that they were missing a critical piece of the puzzle. The answer came from an unexpected source, a distress signal from an ancient Ark-class starship that had been adrift for centuries, long thought to be lost in deep space. The vessel, identified as the Tamanus Ark, had been rediscovered by scavengers on the edge of Galactic Union space. It carried data archives from the ship's original mission, which dated back to a time before humans had even discovered faster-than-light travel. The records were fragmented but included detailed research logs on a galactic extinction event that had nearly occurred millennia ago. Ethan pored over the data with mounting horror. The Tamanese Ark had been part of an effort to preserve genetic diversity during a similar viral outbreak. The logs suggested that the virus had been artificially created, just like Vognar's syndrome, but this earlier iteration had been intended as a form of population control by a now-extinct species known as the Colurans. The Colurans, a hyper-advanced species, had used the virus to purge ecosystems they deemed unfit for their vision of galactic order. Their plans backfired catastrophically when the virus mutated out of their control, wiping them out instead. But here was the chilling part: the Colurans had documented their work extensively. Among the species they had studied was an obscure, primitive race from a backwater planet, humans. The Colorans had noted humanity's unpredictable immune systems and the unique absence of certain receptors, concluding that humans were unsuitable hosts for their viral bioweapon. Ethan stared at the screen, his mind reeling. Humanity's immunity to the virus wasn't an accident. It was a quirk of ancient bioengineering. The Colorans had designed their weapon to ignore humans because they deemed them too insignificant to bother with. And now, centuries later, someone had resurrected their work. Ethan sat back, rubbing his temples as the implications sank in. Whoever had resurrected the Coloran virus didn't just stumble upon ancient data, they had deliberately adapted it to modern species. But why? And why were humans still excluded? He shared his findings with the team, their reactions ranging from disbelief to outright horror. Dr. Thrack's mandibles twitched in agitation as he paced, his movements sharp and erratic. If this data is correct, we are not dealing with an accidental outbreak or a random act of terror, Thrack said. This is calculated. It is systematic. But systematic for what purpose? Vaughn asked. Her bioluminescence flickered erratically, betraying her distress. The Colorans are extinct. What could anyone gain by mimicking their actions? Ethan leaned forward, hands steepled. Control, he said. The Colorans wanted to control the galaxy by shaping which species thrived and which didn't. Someone else has picked up where they left off. But who? Marek demanded. And why would they leave us out of the crosshairs? Ethan didn't answer. The answers were there, tantalizingly close, but the missing pieces still eluded him. He turned his focus back to the Tammany's Ark's logs. The scavengers had managed to upload fragments of the ship's data to the Galactic Union Central Archives before abandoning it. That meant the original vessel might hold more intact files. We need to find that ship, Ethan said. If the rest of the logs are still on board, they might tell us who's behind this. Thrack clicked in agreement. A direct investigation could be our best chance. But it will not be simple. The Tammany's Ark is in an unstable region of space. And time's not on our side, Ethan said grimly. If we don't find a way to stop the virus, there won't be a galaxy left to save. The journey to the edge of Union space was fraught with danger. The region surrounding the Tammany's Ark was a chaotic mess of decaying star systems, asteroid fields, and gravitational anomalies that had swallowed countless vessels over the centuries. Despite the risks, Ethan and his team, along with a small contingent of security forces led by Marek, pressed on. The ship loomed like a ghost in the darkness when they finally reached it. Its massive hull was scarred by age and meteor impacts, and its once grand design now resembled a derelict monument to a forgotten era. It drifted in the void, eerily silent save for the faint hum of residual power still coursing through its systems. This thing gives me the creeps, Marek muttered as their shuttle docked with the Ark's main airlock. Feels like we're disturbing something best left alone. Let's hope it's worth it, Ethan replied, strapping on his rebreather as the airlock hissed open. The stale, metallic air inside the Ark carried a faint tang of decay. The team moved cautiously through the corridors, their lights cutting through the oppressive darkness. The ship was massive, and much of it had succumbed to the ravages of time. Bulkheads were buckled, and debris littered the floors. Yet the central data core was remarkably intact, its systems preserved by redundancies designed to last for millennia. Ethan worked quickly, interfacing with the ancient console. The Coloran script was incomprehensible to most of the team, but automated translation algorithms filled in the gaps. As he sifted through the logs, he began to piece together a clearer picture. The Colorans had indeed intended their virus as a tool of control, but their ambitions had extended beyond mere biological engineering. Their ultimate goal was to create a galaxy where only optimal species survive, those that conform to their rigid standards of intelligence, structure, and adaptability. Humans, chaotic and unpredictable, had been excluded not out of mercy but out of disdain. The Colorans viewed us as anomalies, Ethan said, his voice heavy with realization. Too random, too messy. They didn't think we were worth the effort of exterminating. Marek snorted. Well, joke's on them. Messy seems to be working out for us. Ethan wasn't so sure. As he delved deeper into the logs, he uncovered references to a shadowy coalition one that had discovered the Colorans' research centuries after their extinction. The coalition had preserved the data, waiting for the right moment to unleash it. The records didn't reveal the coalition's identity, but they did confirm one chilling detail: the virus was only the beginning. The logs described a larger plan to reshape the galaxy, one that involved not just biological warfare but the systematic dismantling of existing civilizations. The virus was a tool to destabilize populations and create power vacuums, paving the way for the coalition's rise. This isn't just genocide, Ethan said, his stomach twisting. It's a galactic coup. Thrakek loomed over him, his segmented eyes narrowing. Then we must find out who is behind it. The answers must lie deeper within this vessel. Ethan nodded, but his unease deepened as they pressed onward. The Colorans had been annihilated by their own creation, yet their legacy continued to wreak havoc. Whoever had resurrected their plans was playing with the same fire, and the galaxy was already burning. The final pieces of the puzzle fell into place in the Ark's command center, a cavernous chamber lined with towering holoscreens. Ethan accessed the primary database, which revealed a horrifying truth: the coalition responsible for the virus wasn't alien. It was human. A breakaway faction from Earth, calling itself the Celestial Vanguard, had stumbled upon the Coloran archives decades ago. They believed humanity's immunity to the virus made them uniquely suited to rule the galaxy. The Vanguard viewed the Coloran virus as a cleansing tool, one that would eliminate rival species and create a galactic order in which humanity reigned supreme. Ethan felt sick. This is insane. They're using our immunity as an excuse to justify genocide. Voln's bioluminescence pulsed violently. Your species would do this to the galaxy? To us. They're not my species, Ethan said firmly. The Vanguard doesn't represent Earth or humanity. Most humans don't even know this faction exists. Thrak's mandibles clicked in fury. It does not matter what the majority of your kind believes. The actions of a few could condemn us all. Ethan's mind raced. The Vanguard's plan wasn't just a threat to the galaxy, it was a stain on humanity itself. If they succeeded, every other species would see humans as monsters, immune to the virus they had unleashed. The survivors would retaliate, ensuring that humanity's legacy would be one of betrayal and destruction. We have to stop them, he said, his voice steely. And we have to do it now. Ethan worked frantically at the Ark's command console, his fingers moving in tandem with the ancient holo keys. Each new revelation felt like a heavier weight pressing down on him. The Vanguard's base of operations was hidden in a remote sector of space, buried in a nebula that shielded it from conventional scans. The data revealed their timetable: the final phase of their plan would begin within days. The virus, already devastating the galaxy, was only the precursor. The Vanguard had engineered a secondary wave, a hypermutation of the pathogen designed to target every surviving species, including the ones showing resistance to the initial strain. The only population still immune would be humans. Marek leaned over Ethan's shoulder, reading the coordinates as they materialized on the screen. That's deep in the Zoran Nebula, he said. We'll never get a signal out once we're in there. Then we won't need one, Ethan replied, determination hardening his voice. If we can disable their lab and destroy the secondary strain, we can stop this. Thrak regarded him with an unreadable expression. And if we fail? Then it won't matter what happens to us, Ethan said, his voice low. Because there won't be a galaxy left to fight over. The team departed the Ark, leaving behind its crumbling corridors and ancient secrets. Armed with the data they'd retrieved, they set course for the Zoran Nebula. The journey was tense, the silence on the ship broken only by the hum of engines and the occasional terse conversation about tactics. Ethan barely slept, his mind consumed by the enormity of the task ahead. The Vanguard hadn't just resurrected the Coloran virus, they had weaponized it on a scale the galaxy had never seen. And they had done so in humanity's name. The Zoran Nebula was a swirling vortex of brilliant colors and deadly radiation, its beauty masking the chaos within. Navigating its turbulent corridors required precision, but Thrake, with his multi-limbed dexterity, piloted their vessel through the maelstrom. The Vanguard's base was concealed within a hollowed-out asteroid at the nebula's heart, a fortress surrounded by automated defenses. Ethan studied the display as they approached. We'll have to disable their shields before we can even think about getting inside. Vaughn nodded, her bioluminescence pulsing as she interfaced with the ship's systems. Their defenses are formidable, but their code relies on Coluran patterns. It may be vulnerable to an override. Do it, Ethan said, and keep it quiet. If they know we're here, we lose the element of surprise. The ship shuddered as Vaughn sent a pulse through the Vanguard systems. Alarms blared on their end, but the shields flickered and dropped just long enough for Thrake to guide their vessel into a docking port. Ethan led the team out, armed with stolen Vanguard weapons and a clear objective: destroy the lab and retrieve any remaining data to prevent the virus's replication. The interior of the base was a stark contrast to the chaos outside. It was sterile, its halls gleaming with advanced human technology. Ethan couldn't help but feel a pang of anger and shame. This wasn't what humanity was supposed to represent. They had fought their way into the stars not to dominate, but to understand, to connect. But the Vanguard had twisted that dream into something monstrous. The first signs of resistance came in the form of automated drones, their sleek forms emerging from hidden panels in the walls. Marek took point, his military training evident as he fired precise bursts of energy to disable them. Thrake and Vaughn provided support, using their respective species' strengths to overcome obstacles Ethan wouldn't have been able to navigate alone. As they pushed deeper into the base, they encountered Vanguard operatives, humans who fought with a disturbing zeal. They shouted slogans about humanity's destiny and the purity of their cause, their fervor unnerving even Marek. "These people are fanatics," Marek growled as they secured a corridor. "They won't stop unless we put them down." "Then we give them no choice," Ethan said grimly. "But no killing unless absolutely necessary. If we're going to salvage humanity's reputation after this, it starts here." Marek nodded reluctantly, and they pressed on. They reached the lab at the core of the base, its walls lined with vats of bioengineered samples. The air hummed with the energy of active experiments, and the stench of antiseptic chemicals was overwhelming. Ethan's gaze locked onto the central console, where a massive stasis chamber housed a pulsating mass, the hypermutated strain, alive and ready for deployment. "We have to destroy it," Vaughn said, her tone urgent. "If it escapes." "It won't," Ethan interrupted. "Thrake, help me rig this place to blow. Vaughn, see if you can extract any data. If there's a cure buried in their files, we need it." The team worked quickly, but the Vanguard wasn't about to let their prize be taken without a fight. Alarms blared as more operatives poured into the lab, their weapons blazing. Ethan ducked behind a console, his pulse racing as he returned fire with a salvaged pistol. "You've got 2 minutes," he shouted over the chaos. Marek held the line, his movements sharp and controlled as he covered the others. Thrake moved with surprising speed for his size, planting charges on the structural supports while Vaughn sifted through the database with an intensity that made her glow brighter than ever. Ethan moved to the stasis chamber, his breath catching as he stared at the mass within. It pulsed with an almost malevolent life, its tendrils quivering as if aware of its impending destruction. He set the final charge, his fingers trembling. A voice called out behind him. "Step away from the chamber." Ethan turned slowly to see a man in Vanguard insignia, his weapon trained on him. The man's face was hard, his eyes burning with conviction. "You don't understand what we're trying to do," the man said. "The galaxy is broken. We're giving it a fresh start." Ethan shook his head. "You're not fixing anything. You're killing billions of innocent people." "They're not like us," the man sneered. "They're weak, inefficient. We're the next step." Ethan's anger boiled over. "You think humanity is special because of this virus? We're immune because some ancient species didn't think we were worth the trouble to kill. That's not superiority. That's blind luck." The man hesitated, his resolve faltering just long enough for Ethan to act. He lunged forward, knocking the weapon aside and triggering the charge. The room shook as the countdown began, red lights flashing ominously. "We're out of time," Ethan shouted. "Fall back." The team sprinted through the base as the charges detonated in sequence, the explosion consuming the lab and its monstrous creation. They barely made it back to their ship before the entire asteroid began to collapse, the Vanguard's fortress reduced to rubble. As they broke free of the nebula, Ethan sank into his chair, his body trembling with exhaustion. The galaxy was far from healed, but the immediate threat was over, and humanity's role in the crisis would not be forgotten. In the aftermath, Ethan presented the data they had recovered to the Galactic Union. The Vanguard's actions were condemned universally, and Earth's representatives worked tirelessly to distance themselves from the rogue faction. The galaxy remained fractured, but efforts to rebuild began. Ethan returned to Earth with a heavy heart. Humanity's resilience had saved it from the virus, but their capacity for destruction had almost doomed the galaxy. As he stood under the clear blue sky of his homeworld, he vowed to ensure that humanity's legacy among the stars would be one of understanding, not fear. For the first time in weeks, he allowed himself to hope.